Welcome everybody to Go Local Live. I'm Josh Fenton, CEO and co-founder. We're going right down to the University of Virginia. Jennifer Lawless, the chair of the Political Science Department. As always, thank you for joining us.
Happy to be with you.
Okay, we're about 60 days away from Election Day. Next week's a very big week, a milestone week. The first presidential debate between the Vice President Harris and former President Trump. Give us the overview of that debate situation.
The first thing that's really striking is that the two of them have never met. And so this will literally be the first time that Kamala Harris and Donald Trump meet one another. Typically, that's not the case, but Donald Trump didn't attend Biden's inauguration, so he didn't meet the vice president. I assume that the initial introduction will be very, very civil, and the rest of the debate will not be. It looks like, in terms of structure, it's a win for the Trump campaign. Basically, the two sides have agreed to the terms that had been struck between Donald Trump and Joe Biden, which includes a muted microphone for the person who's not speaking. Kamala Harris was hoping that Donald Trump's microphone would be on because she wanted people to hear him while she was talking, assuming that he would interrupt or become unhinged. Trump's campaign wanted it off because they didn't want to risk that. And Donald Trump, it seems, wanted the microphone on, but apparently lost to his own handlers. So we'll see what happens on that front, but at least the optics will be one in which one candidate is speaking at a time.
But let me just ask, that off mic provision was established sort of after the chaos of the 2020 race, and the Biden team wanted Trump's mic off in that first debate, correct?
Yes, so the Biden team wanted Trump's mic off because Donald Trump made it almost impossible for Joe Biden to finish a sentence and allow people who were watching the debate to hear that sentence. Kamala Harris and Joe Biden are two very, very different candidates, and it was clear that she would have preferred people to see him constantly attempting to interrupt her. She lost that round, but I don't think it's necessarily a huge loss.
And of course, in that June debate, Joe Biden couldn't finish his own sentence, not because of interruptions, because of Donald Trump, because of Joe Biden.
Although it's interesting in that in the post-debate analysis, the shutting off the microphone really seems to work in terms of viewers at home, because the discussion afterward did acknowledge that Donald Trump was speaking over Joe Biden. Joe Biden could hear him. That is not an excuse for Joe Biden's performance by any means. Right. Joe Biden could hear him, but viewers couldn't hear it. So it in some ways allows people to watch the debate under more civilized circumstances, and there's not this constant interruption. But the candidates themselves are only 8 feet apart, and so if one of them wants to speak, the other one can hear those interruptions and has to just sort of plow through it. The other major dimension of the debate that we'll be watching for is policy versus personality, and people will be judging both candidates on both dimensions. And we'll see, Donald Trump would be well served to stick to policy as much as he possibly can and demonstrate a level of discipline for 90 minutes. Kamala Harris will be well served if she can highlight some more specifics regarding her policies and show that when Donald Trump does interrupt her, or when Donald Trump does try to bully her, that she has no problem putting him in his place.
So let's break this down. What are the dangers for Harris during this debate, and what are the dangers for Trump? I mean, the bar is fairly low for Trump. Last time against Biden, which obviously Trump won, Biden had to leave the race, but CNN fact checkers more than 30 times Donald Trump said straight out lies. What's the danger for each one of them in this debate?
Yeah, I would say as far as the Biden-Trump debate, I don't know that Trump won as much as Biden lost worse than anybody has ever lost a debate. So, we weren't even really assessing the candidates relative to one another. We were assessing Joe Biden relative to any hypothetical president, and he didn't meet that bar. As far as this debate, the landmines are many for both. So Donald Trump needs to demonstrate that he can answer a series of questions and he can stick to the script. He needs to demonstrate that he's not going to bash Kamala Harris on her personality, that he's not going to get all wound up and come undone when she criticizes him or condemns him or questions him. She needs to avoid being perceived as a know-it-all. She needs to avoid being perceived as somebody who's trying to bait Donald Trump. She wants to bait him and she wants him to take the bait, but she has to do it in, I think, a more diplomatic way than she might have with Mike Pence with the famous, I'm speaking, it's my turn line 4 years ago.
Right. What about the danger of if Donald Trump were disciplined in this debate, which we really don't expect him to be, but if he were on the economy, the Trump campaign has a very effective ad out right now with her talking about inflation and how much money it's taken out of American families. It's on like an iPad, and then it's juxtaposed to a nearly identical iPhone video of her talking about how great Bidenomics are. Isn't that the real danger for Harris? Trump continues to lead her on the issue of who's better at handling the economy.
The economy will be the area where Trump has the opportunity to shine. The problem is that although that ad is very, very effective, and it's basically Kamala Harris debating herself about Bidenomics, right. Although that ad is very effective, Donald Trump seems to have forgotten about COVID and the conditions that the Biden team inherited in 2021. And so Donald Trump wants comparisons to be December of 2019. And that's not what the economy looked like when Donald Trump left office. So what Kamala Harris needs to do, and Joe Biden was not able to walk this line in a compelling way, we'll see if Harris can. What Harris needs to do is explain that the comparisons are just not right. And what we really need to do is compare the economy that Joe Biden inherited from the economy that we have right now. And that that the progress is far from finished, that she understands that working families are still struggling, but here are the very, very real consequences of a return to Trump policies. So they're going to be talking over each other. They're going to be referring to all different data, all different examples. The question is who can do it in a really compelling way. And I think the jury's still out.
On the polls are showing that Trump has some advantage on the issue of the economy, but it also shows that he has a dramatic weakness on being old, cranky, and somewhat dangerous. Is that really the critical element for her to exploit during this debate, that he looks unhinged, that he keeps chirping, that he looks unpresidential?
So under ordinary circumstances, I would say yes, but everybody already knows that about Donald Trump, and they're neck and neck in the polls, right? Like, it's not like people are going to see a Donald Trump that they've never seen before if he just reverts to the usual act. So I think she has to do more than that. And one of the things that she can do is goad him into being explicitly critical of her. And so not just being the old crabby guy, but also really indicating what most people perceive, which is that he doesn't think that she should be the nominee. Let him call into question whether she deserves the nomination. I think that's the landmine that he needs to avoid. The other thing that I would say is he has to thread a pretty difficult needle when it comes to accusing her of flip-flopping, because on abortion and reproductive rights, where she has a major advantage and she's seen as quite authentic, he has had a week that is almost unthinkable in terms of basically taking every position on the issue more than once. And that's an issue that is motivating Democrats. So for those suburban women, for those swing voters, if he repeats a lot of the mistakes that he's made over the course of the last week on that issue, she's not going to give him a pass.
In one of the segments of Bullwinkle, always important to bring into Bullwinkle, there's a ending of a cartoon segment in which a parade goes through, and at the end a little guy is sweeping up the mess from all the confetti. That seems like Vance this week, J.D. Vance, trying to clean up Trump's comments on abortion, where he literally contradicted himself in some days back to back. How do the Republicans fix that, and do they even have a position right now on abortion?
The Republican Party has a position on abortion, and it's not the position that Donald Trump has. And the problem with Donald Trump's position is that it's actually pretty politically expedient, right? His position generally supports Roe versus Wade. Relatively few restrictions in the first trimester, and then restrictions with exceptions for cases of rape and incest in the life of the mother in the second and third trimester. That is not an unpopular opinion. It is an unpopular opinion among conservative Republicans, And that's why they wanted him to overturn Roe versus Wade. That's why he supported and got confirmed 3 Supreme Court justices who voted to overturn Roe versus Wade. And now he realizes that, oh, maybe the American public didn't realize what overturning Roe versus Wade meant. So he's stuck between a rock and a hard place because he's glommed on to the position that probably would curry the most favor with the American public, but he's out of step with his party on it.
So after the debate, is someone going to win this debate, or will we be divided in interpretation as we are in the electorate?
I think there will be a clear winner. But as we saw in 2016, Hillary Clinton won all 3 of those debates, and that doesn't translate into a win on election night. So debates matter in that for some people, they will energize them and make them be sure to turn out for their candidate. For some voters, it'll be just further reinforcement of why they would never vote for the other person. But it's unclear that most debates can really move the needle. June 27th, when the debate performance was so bad that Joe Biden ultimately had to drop out of the race, is far, far more unusual than a debate with a clear winner, a clear loser, and no real movement in the polls.
And then what happens? What else will determine what this race will happen? Will then be at about 50 days almost, not a lot of time, not an opportunity to sort of reinvent oneself. How does somebody who potentially loses the debate bounce back and claim victory?
Well, I think it depends on what grounds that person loses the debate. If Donald Trump loses the debate because Kamala Harris prosecuted her case and he came undone, but he came undone in a way that people are accustomed to seeing him come undone, I don't know that it's particularly damning. If he says something that indicates that he has lost touch with actual policy, or if he says something to suggest that maybe he is too old to be president, that could be a problem that he would then have to come back from. But it's 90 minutes, and most of the time, the mistakes are not that critical. So I think moving forward, there are a couple of additional moments that could matter. First, do they agree to a second debate? The loser likely will want another debate. We'll see what the winner says. Second, although the vice presidential debates typically don't matter that much in terms of vice presidents affecting outcomes, it's yet one more opportunity for the campaigns to clarify their messages. So that will matter. And then interest rates and what happens at the end of September are also going to be an indicator that we should be following. And although they're not going to be a September or an October surprise, they can certainly shift the economic climate a little bit.
Okay, GoLocal published a piece complete with videos from the DNC convention and an interview with Dr. Ahmad, a professor of law down at Barry University. She was a delegate for Florida attending the event. She and 2 other people unrolled a sign that was on, literally like a bed sheet saying, "Stop arming Iran." Videos capture members of the suite behind her who were members of the Labor's International Union, a significant, powerful force in the labor movement, and headquartered, the North American office is here in Providence. Show them hitting her in the head with a sign, and then in another situation shows what appears to be the president of the union, Brett Booker, ripping the sign out of her hands and destroying it. This has gotten little attention, almost none, from the national media. We sort of put this all together. What does this say about sort of, I don't know, the Democratic Party has some bad actors as much as the Republicans? Well, it seems so out of place at a convention that was so positive, so much about joyfulness, and a very kumbaya type of atmosphere.
Look, I think the reality is that there are bad apples on every tree, and that there are thugs and bullies in every environment. And there's never a place for violence. There's never what they did is never an appropriate response to peaceful protest. And it's not, there's nothing to be justified. But I don't think that it speaks to a much broader, I don't think that we should generalize to the entire convention or to most of the people there or to what their attitudes are about what's going on in Israel and Gaza. I think these were bad people and bad players behaving badly, and they should suffer consequences for that. But I don't think that it tells us much more beyond that.
We've seen a brutal week, 6 hostages being killed by Hamas as Israeli soldiers were on the precipice of rescuing them. Massive demonstrations in Israel against Netanyahu. Colleges are now back. Are we going to see activism on the college campuses? And do you get a sense amongst your colleagues who are studying the Middle East as to what's taking place there and how it plays out and potentially influences the presidential election here?
I think there are a couple of things going on. The first is Netanyahu's statement either today or yesterday that there's no ceasefire on the table, that the deal is off, and that it was basically off as of July, demonstrates that the messages that were being transmitted to the Biden administration were not sincere. And so I think that fundamentally changes the calculus and the prospects for any kind of ceasefire or deal that the United States can help broker. The fact that these 6 hostages, including 1 American citizen, were killed, initially the response was, oh my gosh, if the ceasefire would have just happened a couple of days sooner, this could have been avoided. And now we find out that no, about 6 weeks ago, Netanyahu basically decided he wasn't moving forward. So I think the Democrats and the Republicans have to recalibrate what their next step is and what their next move is. The other thing that I would say is that Kamala Harris is not Joe Biden. She was the person at the convention who was the most explicit in terms of the high-profile speakers about not only supporting Israel and remaining an ally, but also making sure that we stop what's going on in the Middle East right now, and that the current state of affairs in Gaza is unacceptable, and killing innocent Palestinians is unacceptable, and there's got to be a way for 2 things to happen at once. So I don't think that she's going to bear the same level of consequences that Joe Biden would have had he been at the top of the ticket. I think it's a little bit too soon to see how this is going to matter on college campuses. Most schools are now getting back to, their classes are beginning, their semesters are resuming. It's still early, but I also think that a lot of college presidents and administrators learned a lot from last year, and their tactics have changed. So even if demonstrations are very prevalent, I don't think we're going to see the kind of footage that we saw last time.
Is Netanyahu just playing out the clock, hoping for a Donald Trump win? His view is he'll get a sort of a green light from the Trump administration versus the Harris administration. The former president is not talking about ceasefires and demanding ceasefires. Is that the game being played on the global stage?
I think that's part of the game. He's also trying to save his own life, right? He's been charged with war crimes. He knows that the minute he's no longer in power, he has no support behind him, and his best chance at remaining president is to continue to allow this to go on and not, broker a ceasefire. I don't know what his end game is, though, because he's now doing things that are making it increasingly unlikely that hostages will be freed and sent home alive. So I don't understand the dynamics. I don't understand what's going on in his mind right now. It's got to be self-interest and not about overall prospects for peace.
Professor, you get the last word. What should we be looking at over the next week?
I would say that one issue that we did not think was going to be particularly high profile in the election, but it now will, happened yesterday with the new mass shooting in Georgia with 2 teachers and 2 ninth graders who were killed at the hands of a 9th grader with an AR-15 style weapon. The Georgia State Senate and committees in the Georgia legislature were already planning to meet today and are continuing to meet to discuss limitations for who can access those kinds of weapons. We heard Kamala Harris yesterday talk about how this is just not acceptable in this country and we've got to move forward. And gun control and restrictions regarding access seem to have sort of come off of the agenda heading into the election, and I think they're right back up there.
Yeah, I mean, we've been suffering from it here. Not a 14-year-old, but an 18-year-old was killed a week ago Sunday on his birthday in his driveway on his 18th birthday, and then last Thursday night, a 7-year-old was shot in her father's car. She succumbed to her injuries and died on, I believe, Monday. So gun violence is high profile here in Providence, and a very sad period of time for seeing the death of extremely young people at the hands of guns. As always, thank you, and we look forward to the debate and having conversations about it, analyzing it. For everybody else, stay tuned. A lot going on if you haven't seen it. Snoop Dogg and Carolyn Raphalian have launched a new brand, and we've got it exclusively, and we'll have much more throughout the day. Just a tremendous amount of news breaking here on GoLocal. Thanks, everybody. Stay safe. Enjoy tremendous weather. John Giorgi gave it a 10 on the Giorgi factor.